Let's Take This Outside with Marianne Iveson, the podcast where she speaks to athletes, outdoor professionals, and scientists about why they connect with nature.
Nicola Ross is an award-winning writer, best-selling author, and professional hiker who's trekked trails across the globe, from the Bruce Trail to Patagonia. Nicola has written 12 books, including the wildly popular Loops and Lattes series, and her newest released, 40 Days and 40 Hikes. With over 50,000 guidebooks sold, Nicola's adventures have taken her across mountains, coasts, and continents. Please welcome the lovely Nicola Ross. Nicola Ross, welcome to Let's Take This Outside.
Well, good to be here after, getting ready. I'm ready for it now.
Yeah, it's been a couple months that we prepped for this, and it's like, okay, it's go time. First of all, I love describing people's backgrounds, but you live in an old mill, and it's like everything's wood behind you. It's very like aligned with how you present yourself, but you live in an old mill in southwestern Ontario, right?
Southern Ontario.
Or sorry, Southern Ontario, yeah.
Yeah, it's an old mill. Downstairs is the mill part. It's, stone walls, 1.5 feet thick. And no insulation. There's good to bad in living in a mill. But it's a beautiful old building, and a river runs almost through it. So that's kind of cool too.
Do you can you just make your own hydro through the?
Well, one time that happened, but we don't. The river now goes around the house. But it basically, when you sit in our downstairs room, it looks like the river's coming right at you, because then it goes around, because they moved it around. Because at one time it did go right through the building.
Of course it did. It's a mill. The reason we're in contact is because of Lee McAdam comes up on this podcast all the time from Hike Bike Travel. We've become good friends. I've met Lee a couple times now. But you've known Lee for a while, but you've never actually met. But you know through each other through the outdoor space in Canada, right?
Yeah. We just, as I said, I can't remember. I guest blog for her quite regularly, which is helpful to me sometimes, because if I'm trying to go on a trip and get somebody to pay for it, then I say, well, I can blog on Lee's blog, and she's got such a huge following. Yeah. And every time I ask her what it is, it gets bigger. And so that's helpful to me. And she's more hardcore than I am, for sure, but we kind of share a passion, and someday we'll meet. We keep trying, but we haven't done it.
You have to. I know that you would love each other because you have similar energy. Also, don't undervalue. You've done some amazing outdoor feats, but she's a beast. I don't know what. Lee's in better shape than I am. I'm I can't even. Yeah. She's always on the go. Yeah. So you live in Alton, Ontario. It's northwest of Toronto, right?
Just yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where did your love of nature begin?
I grew up, I live in Caledon. The village that I'm in now is Alton, but I grew up 10 kilometers down the road in a village, tiny little village called Bellefontaine. My dad bought this place. It was 100 acres with a river running through it, and he built trails. And, he actually, this is really funny, but he had a couple of passions. One of them was Jack in the Pulpits, and the other were Yellow Lady Slipper flowers. And if we found one or another of those, he'd give us 10 cents. So we're always on the lookout for these flowers. We weren't allowed to pick them, obviously, but and as a family, we walked, right? And as I got older, I just spent a lot of time exploring the local environment. And, I had the beauty of growing up in the countryside. So I was lucky.
So hiking is kind of your true passion, right? That's your one true love?
Well, I have a bunch of them, but that's sort of the most natural ones. I was a big equestrian at one point in time in the area, but, there's something about hiking. It's so easy. It's kind of easy on your body, but you can get a good workout. And as I said earlier, I think, I'll go out on my bike. And then I think, but I can just put on a pair of running shoes and walk out my door. And that's just so easy, and I just love it. And I don't, I think on a bicycle, I got to climb that hill. I never feel like that hiking. I always feel like, I'll walk up the hill.
At least you can stop on the hill. You can't really stop on your bicycle.
Exactly. And I find it much harder to climb a hill on a bicycle than I do
on feet.
Yeah.
That's very funny you say that, because when we're recording this, it's becoming spring, and I was just getting my bike out, and I just got one of those bikes with electronic shifting. That's very privileged of me. To get this stupid thing ready, Nicola, I had to charge the bike. I had to charge my Garmin Vario, which is the light in the back that connects with my Garmin in the front that tells me where to go. And it also warns me of traffic behind me. So I had to charge 3 or 4 devices.
Four things.
And I was like, this is stupid. I don't even there's a part of me that's why do I even do this? But I know that but hiking, you're like, I'll just grab some water and my running shoes and yeah. Depending where you're going.
Well, and I think I ride a Bike Friday. Do you know what Bike Friday is? They're these little folding bikes. It's a full touring bike, but it's a folding bike. And I did a deal with Bike Friday to write in exchange for writing about it. They turned it into an e-bike. I had to ship it back to the States, and they shipped it back to me. And then some friend of mine, he found another Bike Friday for me. And so I bought that. It doesn't have any electronics on it. And I never ride the e-bike. I always take out because I go, I have to charge it. And it's the same
it feels like
thing.
It defeats the purpose. You're like, I have to charge my bike.
Yeah, we're kindred spirits. Yeah.
Nicola, you've written 12 books, including the best-selling Loops and Lattes hiking guides. Loops and Lattes, that is... It just rolls off the tongue. It's such a nice... So I'm assuming you also have a love of coffee too?
Yes. In particular, lattes.
And do you like stopping in between hikes? Because I associate hiking and outdoor activities with cafe stops in between or afterwards or in between. So what connected Loops and Lattes for you, when you came up with the title?
Yeah, I have kind of a line that I use. I mean, my hiking guides are all for Southern Ontario. And there's sort of this feeling out there in parts of the hiking community that the real hiking is in the mountains, in Alberta or British Columbia, whatever the case may be. And so I sort of am apologetic and I go, well, this isn't the Canadian Rockies, these hikes, but you can often get a latte or a coffee right on the trail.
Amazing.
So that's the trade-off, right? I mean, of course, we've got beautiful hiking.
Yes, of course.
It isn't just in the mountains. And I love the cultural. I go after hikes where you go through towns and villages, and there is that kind of cultural content, as well as the beautiful lookouts and the water and the trees and the valleys. So I like both.
I'm going to ask you about that later, the cultural part, the connections for that. But tell me more about Loops and Lattes and what those look like.
Yeah, there are 7 of them. Various. I've sold out of a couple of them, but each one has about 36 different hikes. They're mostly loops, and I did loops because we are genetically predisposed to walking in a circle. We don't really like walking.
Like an out and back?
Going in and come. Yeah. We hate it.
We don't like it's true. Oh my gosh, that's so true.
I know, it's true. And even when you turn around and come back, the trail looks completely different.
Yeah.
We don't like doing it. One thing that we have a lot of in Southern Ontario is trails. And so there are a lot of loops, the opportunity to walk in loops. And, sometimes it might be a back road that you have to loop onto, but there's lots of opportunities. The Bruce Trail, for instance, it's about 900 kilometers long, the main trail, but it has 450 kilometers of side trails. And so the ability to do these loops is amazing. And I led a hiking group for a long time, and we always did loops. And so consequently, it seemed like and it rhymed with lattes. So.
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
One of the most, speaking of the Bruce Trail, one of the most beautiful parts of Ontario is the Bruce Peninsula, Tobermory area, where where one side of the Bruce Trail starts. So I've done sections of the Bruce Trail, but just on the Bruce Peninsula. And if people don't know about the Bruce Peninsula, it's these crystal blue waters that look like the Caribbean. Yeah. They have almost what are they called? The rock formations coming out.
The flower pots.
The flower pots. They have the flower pots coming out. It's a really exquisite part of Canada. Tell me about the Bruce Trail you just mentioned, how long it was. And also the book that goes along with it, 40 Days and 40 Hikes, Loving the Bruce Trail One Loop at a Time. Why the Bruce Trail? Yeah,
the Bruce Trail runs along something called the Niagara Escarpment, and it's what's called a scarp, which is sort of a cliff face, and it starts actually in the New York State, comes into Canada, and then runs across Southern Ontario, and then goes up. So it goes up the Niagara Peninsula. It's a beautiful part of Canada as well. Niagara Falls and Niagara Escarpment. The Niagara Falls goes over the Niagara Escarpment. And then the trail runs along the Bruce Peninsula and then across Southern Ontario, right through Hamilton, for instance, and a number of different towns, and kind of on a, trajectory northwest. And then it goes up what's called, as you say, the Bruce Peninsula. And what the Bruce Peninsula is now called the Bruce, there's either the Saugeen Peninsula or the Bruce Saugeen. I call it the Bruce, which is an indigenous name. And the Bruce Saugeen, it separates Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes, from something called Georgian Bay. And I think a lot of people have heard of Georgian Bay, Collingwood, Blue Mountain skiing. And it's just this huge, it's the size of, larger than most lakes in the world. And it's a bay off Lake Huron. And this peninsula goes up there. It stops at a place called Tobermory. The Niagara Escarpment goes underwater, right at this spot where these two bodies of water come together, Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. Then it comes up again as Manitoulin Island. And then it continues back into the United States, and it goes down the west side of Lake Michigan, and then sort of into Lake Michigan along a peninsula and ends somewhere near Chicago. They don't really celebrate it so much in the U.S., but in Canada, our section is a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. It's part of the greater Golden Horseshoe Greenbelt, and it's this protected area, never quite protected enough. And the Bruce Peninsula is the wild part. The most wild, it's sort of the farthest away from civilization. And I discovered kind of a neat thing when I was doing research about the Bruce Trail, and the founders of the Bruce Trail, who were from Hamilton. They sort of called it the Bruce. They didn't call it the Bruce Peninsula. They called it the Bruce. And what it really meant to them was wilderness. Like, that's where the wilderness was. And so, there's even a book, the Bruce Beckons. And that really is the area. It's a long way between roads. It's not highly populated. It's got the cliffs that you talk about. You look over Georgian Bay, which, as you say, is very Caribbean Sea-like. It has that turquoise water, and it's just really a spectacle. And you do a lot of walking along the cliff with these cedar trees that are over 1,000 years old. It's on top of that. So it's a really special place of Ontario.
Would you say it's your favorite trail in Ontario?
It's just I say it's part of my bone, it's just part of my DNA. I grew up on it. I've walked parts of it all my life. Always wanted to walk the trail. And so it's just, it's just part of me.
I understand that. Like, we went to Manitoulin when I was a kid, and, I loved that, and taking the Chi-Chi-Mon, which is like the ferry over. Yeah. But I remember going back as an adult, because it's pretty far from Ottawa, right? And even my parents are near Windsor. It's like, that's far from, it's like, you have to make a very specific trip to go to Tobermory or the Bruce, right?
Yeah, to drive from Windsor to Tobermory would be 4 hours, at least. Yeah,
it's a very specific trip, but it has a very, very special place in my heart, and I try to go back whenever I can, and it's long overdue. So I love hearing you talk about it, because it means a lot to me. So you've completed and you're about to go on one too. You've completed some long distance treks across all over the world. Do you have one, like a most memorable adventure? And can you tell me about it? Or one of your most memorable adventures? For the good or the bad? For the good or the memorable in the not so great way?
Well, I did have a very memorable trip across Costa Rica. There's a hike that goes from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So you go right across the continent. It's quite a bit narrower there than in Canada, because you can do it in 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks. But I did it as an organized trip. Normally I tend to hike solo, but this one was an organized trip. And I ended up with 6 other women, some Americans and some Canadians. And it was the most dysfunctional group I have ever been on. I named all the other hikers. There was the Never Not Nattering Tortured Soul. We've all met one of those. There was the what did I call her? Snatch, because she stole a dog. She went back. We saw a dog tied up in somebody's yard, like their pet. And she went back the next day and stole it, took it back to the United States. It was hilarious. Beautiful hike, but it was still a great hike, but oh my God, it was crazy.
Some misfits. Some misfits.
Yeah.
In terms of like culture or nature or anything, what would, in terms of that side of it, what would you say?
Well, I mean, that's part of that one. I mean, the bird life and 4 different kinds of monkeys and sloths. And I saw a Jesus lizard. I don't know if you know what a Jesus lizard is.
No, I don't.
They used to have Jesus lizard. It was an ad on TV for a long time with tell us. And they had, and Jesus lizards are they're quite slim. And what they do is they stand up on their back legs and they run so fast that they can run across the water for a short period of time. So
yes, I've seen these.
So they call them Jesus lizards,
yeah,
which
cool.
is quite humorous.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was great. I did a big hike across Austria, Slovenia, and Italy recently. In Slovenia, the Julian Alps in Slovenia, I did a hike there that I will never, ever, ever forget, being in those mountains. And then down by something called the Socha River, which if you think the Georgian Bay looks like the Caribbean, wait till you walk by the Socha River, because it's not only turquoise, but it has no like dust in it. There's a word for that, particulates in it. And so it's like the water isn't there. I saw kayaks like up from a bridge, and I'm looking down, and it's as if they're like suspended. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. So that was a great hike too. I highly recommend it.
That's so cool. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you like to hike solo a lot, which I love adventuring alone. Mm-hmm. I will say that too. For you, why do you like doing that? What's it about the being solo?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about that, especially as a woman. Is it safe? And
right, exactly.
Yeah, and I feel lucky that it doesn't frighten me to walk by myself. So I know a lot of women that would love to walk by themselves, but it scares them, and so consequently they don't do it. When I walked the Camino in Spain, and I walked it many, many years ago, like in 2003, and I met a number of people on that hike who were walking it, not with somebody they particularly wanted to walk with, but with someone because they didn't want to walk by themselves. I saw these arguments between, one hiker much faster than the other, or there was complaints, and I thought, oh my God. And on that hike in particular, you meet people all the time, and you meet so many more people, and if you're walking on your own, I mean, it's such a richer experience. And so that's one reason. But the other reason is when you're walking through, on a forested trail or a back roads trail, not back roads, but through nature. I kind of hate that term, but you just hear so much more and you see so much more. You tend to talk a lot when you're hiking with somebody else, and it's just a very different experience. So, and I also find I'm quite particular about who I like to hike with. So
Same. You have this background as a biologist and climate change consultant. Mm-hmm. How does your environmental perspective shape the way that you experience and write about nature?
I did a lot of environmental writing for a long time. Had a number of publications, was editor for about 7 years of a magazine out of Waterloo called Alternatives Journal, national environmental magazine. And I finally just thought, I can't write another environmental story because they were never good news, almost never good news. I thought, I'm going to commit hara-kiri if I have to do this. So I stopped and I started doing a lot of writing about sport and outdoors and positive stuff. And then I started writing these hiking guides. And it dawned on me one day, because I get notes from people, and these are people that are not converted environmentalists. These are people that just want to walk around the block. And those hiking guides were doing more to educate people about the environment, about nature, and about the importance of loving their backyard than all those articles that I did. And so I just realized there are many ways of trying to get the word out there. I mean, partly it's my passion, but I was able to be passionate about the trails, and I am in the hiking guides. I'm really passionate in 4040 nickname for the book. So, trails have this wonderful thing. People love them, and we protect what we love. Don't fool with somebody's trail because you're going to hear about it. And so as an environmentalist, it was just wonderful to realize the effect the books were. And lots of people bought them. I mean, 50,000 people bought these books.
Yeah.
And so they've become, really important in that way.
You mentioned it already, but many of your travels involve these cultural connections. It could be like, these ancient pilgrimage routes or exploring indigenous landscapes. How do you balance adventure with this cultural awareness?
I have, it's funny that you can say this or that one can say this, but I have a hiking specialty.
Okay.
And that specialty is hikes or long distance hikes that I can do, and I don't have to carry a heavy backpack. I don't have to camp. It's not that I don't like sleeping in a tent. I quite like sleeping in a tent. I just don't want to have to carry a
tent and all that stuff that comes with it. Yeah.
How do you ruin a good hike by having to carry all that stuff? So I specialize in hikes where you can, there's some place to stay at night. Whether it was on my loops and lattes where I did loops and then I just drove my car to wherever I was staying, or whether in the European model, you're going from hut to hut or from hotel to hotel. I just hiked East Coast Trail. Again, you could do it hotel to hotel. So that requires that you get to some place where you can stay. And, I did a big hike I've done some Latin American hikes, a bunch in Guatemala and a bunch in Mexico. And again, staying in these tiny little villages with people. And so I just find, there's so much more than just the beautiful trees and the orchids and the monkeys. There's also how the people live and the interaction with the people that live there. There's a great hike that I've done many times in Mexico, in the Sierra Norte in Oaxaca state. And there you get an indigenous guide that takes you every day. And so every day you go to a different village. A guide takes you there, and then they turn around and walk back again, and then a new guide takes you to the next village, and they're all well-informed and Zapateca Indians. It's just a rich experience. Great way to sort of get inside.
Let's Take This Outside now has a newsletter. Keep up to date with outdoor news, events, and great discount codes and deals from our partners. Sign up today at letstakethisoutside.ca.
Is there a connection, no matter where you are in the world, with how the indigenous people describe their lands and their connection? Is there any connections between, no matter where you are?
I imagine there are, but I haven't traveled extensively. That there tend to be walking cultures, or have been historically. I mean, some of them are paddling cultures, but and they always talk about a closer connection to nature, and I believe that's true. I sometimes think about how noisy I am when I walk, and I think of sort of the stories we learn about moccasins and the quietness. I think, oh man, I wish I could have that kind of, that sort of low impact on the trail.
And the nimbleness and the nimbleness. Feet. There's no chance I could. No chance my feet would be okay.
Yeah, I don't think they use hiking poles. Yeah.
We're so pampered, aren't we?
Exactly.
This is more of a self-indulgent question for me, but can you name 3 of your favorite hut-to-huts? Because the only hut-to-hut I've ever done is Everest Base Camp, which very hard to beat in terms of experience and cultural experience. But I would recommend the Himalayas to anyone. It's an exquisite part of the world. But for you, is there any, I want to do more of these. What are some of your favorite hut-to-huts?
Yeah, certainly the hike I talked about in Sierra Norte in Mexico and Oaxaca. It's an incredible approach. The longest hike that they offer is 7 days. And again, it goes from village to village. It's run by a Zapateca group. They have all kinds of indigenous experiences along the way. There's something called a temazcal, which is sort of like a sweat lodge. I went to a thing where we made tortillas. It was the funniest thing I've ever done in my life. And yet it's walking through these beautiful mountains as well. So that's, probably number. And the accommodations and the food were just unbelievable.
Oh, that's almost just as important. Right? Right? You need good food.
In my hiking guides, I have a section on where to eat and drink. And people tell me, what's my favorite section? It's not the hike. It's where do you go afterwards?
When you're going on an adventure like that, you want really good food at the end of the day.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
On the East Coast Trail in Newfoundland.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Have you hiked it?
I went to Newfoundland last June. We did Gross Moor. I did not do the East Coast Trail, but it is a part of Canada that everyone should visit. It's just the East Coast of Canada.
I've been there before, but last year I just fell in love. I've done this funny little book. I've been drawing. And so I've done this, and every hike I've done is a map. It's sort of annotated maps. And I'm going back to Newfoundland to do a bit of a launch with it. And, just the response I get, because they all love their trails. And there's so much to talk. There's puffins, and there's, kissing a fish. And there's so much about Newfoundland. And so again, and there were places to stay there where you could stay for a few days, and they'd drive you to the trailhead and pick you up at the end of the trail. So that was a great experience. One of the few hikes in North America where you can go hut to hut.
And it's also Newfoundland. That's also very much Newfoundland hospitality.
Oh yeah,
too.
yeah.
Oh, don't worry. We'll get you.
Yeah,
we'll pick you
yeah.
up. Don't worry.
Yeah. And then the names of what was the one place, the restaurant? It was like the Squid Jigger or something, and it's these wonderful words.
It was,
yeah. So that was great. And I have to say that Costa Rica trip, despite what I said, was a very cool, in Europe, like you can go anywhere in Europe. Argentina has great hikes because they got hut to hut. And you get to these huts, and the first time I got to one, I thought it would be like a lean-to, but of course, no, they've got full course meals and beer and wine.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a whole different experience in that part of the world, in Europe.
And you're about to go to Spain.
I'm about to go to Spain. The place I haven't hiked that I've put off is England. I've hiked in Scotland, but in England, and I'm very keen to do that. I've sort of put it off because I feel like it's more sedate, although I know that some of the trails are quite challenging. I really want to walk through the Cotswolds.
Yeah. I'm going in a couple. Well, not to the Cotswolds, but I'm going to the UK for the first time in a couple of weeks. So we'll do a little bit of nature time. Maybe next time, maybe go to the Cotswolds because it looks.
It's so beautiful.
So specific.
It's sort of Southern Ontario and steroids, as they say. It's so beautiful. This
might be hard to narrow down, but what is the biggest lesson you've learned from your time on the trail?
Oh, well, this one isn't magic and it isn't very prophetic, but, it's all about the footwear. So, if you worry about anything before going hiking, make sure you've got something good on your feet. But what have I learned? I talked about it, a moment ago, is that people love their trails. They really love their trails. And that was such an important discovery because I realized that if people love their trails and they love, in the case of the Bruce Trail, for instance, it runs along the Niagara Escarpment. So if you want to protect the Niagara Escarpment, the way to do it is through a trail. And there's some controversy, the sort of nature versus trail. Some conservation organizations say, we don't want trails in there because then people get in there and then you get garbage and you get other problems. And that's all true. But it is a bit of a trade-off. And people love the Bruce Trail. I mean, they love the Bruce Trail. And some of the trails around Ottawa through Gatineau and whatnot,
It's my playground.
Yeah. Think of if you couldn't hike there anymore. If you couldn't go just for a walk, it would change your life. So I think that
it's a big reason I live here.
Yeah. I just saw an article and I didn't. I attended an online Zoom meeting this morning with something called the World Trails Network. And one of the things they're working on, they've picked, 6 different towns and cities in the world that have really paid attention to have good trail networks within cities. I don't know what they are because I didn't see that. And I thought that is so smart. That is so smart to, have these. It's sort of like what bicycles are to Amsterdam, right? And looking at cities and going, okay, who has really good trails? What a great thing to do.
I wonder if Ottawa is on that list. No. Because even in Ottawa, Gatineau Park is incredible and Quebec's incredible, but Ottawa itself has amazing trails. We have a ton of green space, amazing well-kept trails. So I wonder if it's on the list.
I don't know, but Uxbridge, Ontario calls itself the hiking capital of Canada. So you might have competitions.
Oh, I'm ready to fight. I know you mentioned England, but is there pretend there's no limit on money or anything? What'd be your bucket list adventure?
I'd love to hike in New Zealand. I'd really like to hike in New Zealand, but then I've got my eye on a hike in Lebanon. and I've got an eye on a hike. Well, I was looking at this one in Turkey, but it sounds pretty tough. So I don't know if I'm up for it. I have hiked in Nepal, but it was it was a book project I was working on, and it was not an area. I saw Mount Everest from the distance, but it was from village to village. It was a project about a Canadian guy that built schools in Nepal. Came out after that book, 3 Cups of Tea. And of all the hiking I've ever done, I took more pictures on that walk around. It was about 2 weeks long, walking from village to village in Nepal. I haven't done much hiking in Asia, so I don't know so much about it.
But this is a reminder that we are very lucky in Canada. I think no matter where you look, even in your own backyard, we have so much that is accessible to us. Because I really want to also, we're talking about these trips across the world and which, we're privileged enough to be able to go on experiences. But for the most part, I'm going to speak for you too, that probably 90% of the time in nature, 99% of the time in nature, we're probably in our own backyards.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I encourage more Canadian trail organizers to figure out some way that you can do it without having to camp. Or the Bruce Trail's case, you can't even camp. It's not meant for an end to end. But there is another one where you can go hut in Charlevoix in Quebec, which I'd love to do too. And I think there's some good hiking up top in Alberta, but I think you kind of get up top and then you do day hikes from a central location. I haven't done much of that, but I think that would be kind of interesting too.
Nicola, you know what's so funny is Megan J. Ward was just here, who is an amazing writer who I was lucky enough to have on my podcast, so we've become friends. She was just in Ottawa. She was presenting her film Wildflowers at the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. I was lucky to go. You're hosting the Women's Adventure Film Tour in Caledon this November. Tell me more about it and what kind of films that you're bringing. I
kind of got the idea. A friend of mine, or a colleague of mine, has an adventure film festival in Elora. Theirs a little different. They actually bring in the films and judge them and whatnot. Whereas, and I just thought, I'm in this, in this space right at the moment about we need more women out there doing these things. And after my 40 Days and 40 Hikes book came out, I hooked up with 2 other women that had also written travel books. One was an adventure travel. It's a woman that has visited I think they're 50 or 60, all the national parks in Canada. Wow. Yeah. It's called Park Bagger. That is a great name. Yeah, because some of them are, impossible to get to. And then the other one was a woman that was traveling, it was train travel, her thing. And we just realized there's a real dearth of adventure writers, female adventure writers. It's travel writing is not, it's got a section in the bookstore that's got a quarter of a shelf. From that, I and my next step was say, I've seen these adventure films. How about women adventure films? And I just, Googled it, and what came up, it's this organization out of Australia, and they have all these adventure film tours. They do the Warren Miller. I don't know if you're probably too young. Warren Miller was a skier, and every year it was the only one around. Every year, the new Warren Miller film would come out with crazy ski stuff, and we'd all wait until the film came out. And I mean, they've got just adventure film, not women in particular. They've got fly fishing films and all kinds of stuff. And it's this great organization. They do a different lineup of films. They do all the work. They get the films and they give them to you. I think there's 6 films all about women, and they're not just straight endurance kind of thing. The stories tend to be more complicated. I was watching one this morning, and it was about a rock climber, and about mental health issues at the same time. So it has a real kind of female, it's not just about the adventure or about the sport. There's another one about a windsurfer. I think she's a windsurfer in Egypt. There was a film last year in the 2024 series that I've added to ours because it's about Nancy Green, the great Canadian skier. So there's a real, there's this one about cycling. I was hoping to add the wildflower to it, but it's just too much. I've got a full thing. So there's a group of us. We're putting it together. We're holding it in, the Legion. But I think we're going to have lots of interest in it because the films are great. They're really celebrating women in there, about women for women. And yeah, so we hope to turn it into a bigger event in the future where we actually have some speakers and, and maybe kind of a trade fair. I've always wanted to host, this is so unlike me, but I've always wanted to host a hiking gear, cycling gear fashion show.
That's awesome.
And so
that's awesome.
And one of the women on our committee, that's exactly what she does. She does, she's really into the fashion industry. So that's coming in another time. So
please let me know.
I'll let you know. Yeah, we'll get you to come.
And I'll put a link in the bio too of the festival as well, which is great. Now I know exactly why Lee introduced us. This makes perfect sense. You are incredible, and I'll put all the info about your books as well and your guides in the show notes as well. Nicola Ross, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it was a great pleasure to meet you and hear your laugh and. Not with you talking to someone else, but talking to me. So your enthusiasm goes a long way.
Yeah, you're easy to chat with. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. For more Let's Take This Outside, go to letstakethisoutside.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.